You are listening to the Napoleon Bonaparte Deep Study. Today we are going deep into the leadership principles of Napoleon Bonaparte, how he led, how he thought, how he built loyalty, commanded armies, and moved men not through fear, but through something far more powerful. This episode, we extract 7 of Napoleon's greatest leadership principles, the philosophy behind every decision he made as a leader, and the timeless lessons every one of them holds for you today. Let us begin. Before we get into the principles, something worth knowing. Some of the greatest minds of our time have studied Napoleon Bonaparte deeply. Elon Musk, some of the most successful builders, leaders, and thinkers alive today. They read his campaigns, his strategies, his leadership philosophy, his decisions under pressure. Not because they are interested in military history, but because they understood something important. If you want to become truly great at leading people, at building something significant, at making decisions when the stakes are real and the pressure is extreme, Napoleon Bonaparte is one of the most important people you can ever study. He is not just a historical figure, he is a masterclass in leadership that has never been surpassed. So let's get right into the first principle. Napoleon said, "A leader is a dealer in hope." This is one of the most studied lines Napoleon ever produced, and it is worth sitting with for a moment because it tells you everything about how he understood the relationship between a leader and the people he leads. Not a dealer in strategy, not a dealer in orders or plans or logistics, hope. In 1796, Napoleon took command of the French army of Italy. What he inherited was not an army in any functional sense. These were men who had not been paid in months, men who were starving, men whose boots had fallen apart, men who had been defeated so many times that the idea of victory had become genuinely abstract to them. Every rational assessment of that situation said, there is nothing here to work with. Napoleon looked at the same situation and saw something different. He saw men who needed one thing before they needed food or pay or new equipment. They needed to believe that what they were doing meant something, that they were part of something worth giving everything for. His first address to them was not a briefing, it was not a plan. He told them that glory was waiting on the other side of those mountains, that history would remember their names, that the hardship they had endured was not punishment, it was preparation for what was coming. Those same broken men followed him into one of the most successful military campaigns in European history. Nothing material changed before that campaign began. Same men, same equipment, same conditions. What changed was what they believed was possible. And Napoleon understood from the very beginning of his leadership career that belief is not a soft thing. It is not a nice addition to good strategy. It is the foundation that everything else is built on. A team that believes will outperform a team that does not every single time. Regardless of resources, regardless of conditions, regardless of what the rational assessment says. That is not philosophy. That is what Napoleon proved on the ground. Napoleon said, "The army is nothing without the men who compose it." What is remarkable about Napoleon as a leader is not just that he believed this, it is how specifically and practically he acted on it. He learnt the names of his soldiers, not just his generals, not just his officers, his soldiers, ordinary men who fully expected to be invisible to someone at Napoleon's level. And when Napoleon stopped at a campfire, sat down with a group of men, called them by name, asked about where they were from, remembered what they had done in a previous campaign, those men experienced something that very few of them had ever experienced from anyone in authority. They felt seen. And that feeling, the feeling of being genuinely seen and valued by the person you serve, produces something that no order and no incentive can manufacture. It produces loyalty that goes beyond obligation. There is a well-documented account of Napoleon walking through camp the night before a major engagement. He stopped at fire after fire, sat with the men, listened, asked questions, remembered details from previous conversations with men he had not spoken to in months. The next morning, those men did not fight because they were ordered to. They fought because Napoleon had made them feel genuinely that they mattered to him personally. The principle Napoleon understood here is one that the best leaders in any field have always understood. Your people are not instruments of your vision. They are the vision, and the leader who treats them as instruments will always be outperformed by the leader who treats them as the most important part of everything they are trying to build. Napoleon did not lead from behind a desk. He led from the front line, in the heat of the battle, in the cold of the march, in the hunger and the exhaustion and the conditions that every soldier around him was also enduring. And this was not recklessness. This was a deeply held philosophy about what gives a leader the right to ask anything of the people who follow them. Napoleon believed that a leader who does not share the conditions of the people he leads has no genuine authority over them. He may have rank, he may have title, but he does not have the thing that actually moves people. He does not have moral authority. Napoleon was wounded multiple times in battle, not because he was careless with his safety, but because he refused to position himself in a way that separated his experience from the experience of his men. And every time his men saw him in the same conditions they were in, every time they saw that he was not watching from a safe distance, something happened inside them. The distance between leader and follower collapsed. And in that collapse, in that moment of shared experience, a kind of trust was built that nothing else could have produced. This is a principle that transfers completely outside of military context. The leader who is in the work with their people, who understands from direct experience what the work actually demands, earns a quality of respect and loyalty that the leader who manages from a distance never will. Shared experience is one of the most powerful bonding mechanisms available to any leader. Napoleon understood this and lived it completely. Napoleon had a documented ability that surprised everyone who observed it closely. He could remember, with extraordinary precision, the names, faces, histories, and capabilities of a remarkable number of the men under his command, not just the senior officers, men at every level of his army. And this was not a social skill he cultivated for its own sake. Napoleon had a documented ability that surprised everyone who observed it closely. He could remember, with extraordinary precision, the names, faces, histories, and capabilities of a remarkable number of the men under his command, not just the senior officers, men at every level of his army. And this was not a social skill he cultivated for its own sake. It was a strategic weapon, because when you know your people with genuine depth, you know what they are capable of before they know it themselves, you know who to place where, you know whose strength is most valuable in which situation. You know who needs to be pushed and who needs to be steadied. You know who will hold under extreme pressure and who will crack. Napoleon once said that understanding his men was worth more to him than any intelligence report about his enemies. Think about that for a moment. He is saying that the knowledge of the people on his own side, their capabilities, their psychology, their individual strengths and limits, was more strategically valuable than information about what the opposition was doing. Because he believed, and consistently proved, that a leader who knows his people completely can extract from them a performance that no outside analysis can predict or prepare against. This is the principle that separates good leaders from great ones across every field. Good leaders understand the goal. Great leaders understand the people who are going to achieve it. And they understand them deeply enough to place them precisely, to use them in the moments and positions where their specific strengths produce the most. Know your men, know your victory. Napoleon treated these as the same thing, because they are. This principle was genuinely revolutionary in Napoleon's time. The world Napoleon was born into operated on a simple and brutal logic. Who your father was determined what you could become. Birth decided rank, privilege decided opportunity. Talent without the right family name behind it went exactly nowhere. Napoleon looked at that system and dismantled it. He built his army and eventually his entire empire on one radical idea, that what a person can do and what they are willing to give must always, without exception, determine how far they rise. He created the Legion of Honor, a merit-based recognition system that had no precedent in European society at that time. Any soldier, regardless of background, regardless of family, regardless of birth, could earn the highest recognition in the empire through performance alone. His marshals, the most powerful military commanders in Europe, came from every background imaginable: sons of innkeepers, barrel makers, men who under the previous system would have lived and died completely unknown. Napoleon found them, recognized what they were capable of, and elevated them based on one thing only: what they could do. And the effect of this on the culture of his army was extraordinary. Every soldier believed that if he performed, if he gave everything he had, the path upward was genuinely open to him. Not because of who he knew, not because of where he came from, because of what he did. That belief, that the system rewards effort and talent honestly, is one of the most powerful forces a leader can build inside any organization. When people trust that merit is what moves them forward, they give their best, consistently, because they trust the system, they trust the leader, they believe the game is worth playing fully. Napoleon understood this at a level most leaders never reach, and he built it into the foundation of everything he created. Napoleon said, "The moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. This is one of the most important things Napoleon ever said about leadership, and it is worth understanding exactly what he meant. He is not speaking loosely here, he is not being poetic. He is giving you a calculated military assessment based on everything he observed and experienced on the battlefield across decades of command. A believing army, an army that genuinely believes in what it is fighting for and who it is fighting for, is worth 3 times an army of equal size and resources that does not carry that belief, 3 to 1, and the implications of this for leadership in any context are significant. Because most leaders, when they need more from the people they lead, reach for force, more pressure, more oversight, more control, more consequences for underperformance. And force produces something. It produces compliance, minimum required effort, people doing what they must do to avoid the consequence. But belief, genuine belief in the mission, in the leader, in what the team is building together, produces something completely different. It produces discretionary effort, the effort nobody can mandate, the extra mile that no policy can require, the commitment that comes only when a person genuinely cares about the outcome. Napoleon built morale the same way he built everything else in his leadership, through presence, through recognition, through making every man in his army feel that what they were doing was significant and that he personally understood and valued their specific contribution to it. Before major engagements, he would ride through his entire camp, not to inspect, to connect, to look his men in the eye, to remind them of what they had already done together. And they believed him, because everything he had done as their leader had given them every reason to. Napoleon said, "The battlefield is a scene of constant chaos. The winner will be the one who controls that chaos, both his own and the enemy's. Rules are written for predictable situations. Battles are never predictable." And Napoleon understood, at a level that separated him from every other military mind of his generation, that the leader who is bound to rules in a genuinely chaotic situation will always be defeated by the leader who acts on something deeper. Napoleon called it coup d'etat, a French term that translates roughly as the ability to see the entire situation clearly in a single glance and know immediately what needs to be done. It could not be taught from a manual. It could not be produced by following a process. It was built through years of experience, through making decisions under real pressure, through studying every campaign and every commander that came before him, through total immersion in his craft until the knowledge became instinct and the instinct became genius. And here is what Napoleon understood about this that most people miss. He was not rejecting preparation. He was one of the most prepared leaders in history. He studied every battlefield before he fought on it. He memorized maps and supply lines and weather patterns and enemy tendencies with obsessive thoroughness. But all of that preparation was not so he could follow a plan in the moment. It was so that in the moment, when the chaos arrived, as it always did, he had enough depth of understanding to act on instinct with confidence. The preparation built the foundation. The genius operated from it. This is the principle that separates leaders who perform in controlled conditions from leaders who perform when everything is uncertain and the rulebook has no answer. Real leadership capability, the kind Napoleon had, is not built in classrooms. It is built in the field, in the decisions, in the pressure, in the failures and the adjustments and the accumulated experience of actually leading through hard things. That is where genuine leadership genius lives. 7 principles. Not theories, not ideas from a classroom or a business book. Principles that were built and tested and proved under the most extreme leadership conditions in modern history. A leader sells hope because without belief nothing moves. A leader is nothing without his men because loyalty is earned through genuine recognition, not assumed through rank. Lead from the front because shared experience builds the trust that authority alone never can. Know your men because the deepest understanding of your people is the most powerful strategic advantage available to you. Reward merit, because a culture that honestly rewards performance is a culture that produces it consistently. Morale is 3 times more powerful than force, because belief produces what compliance never can. And a commander acts on genius, because the deepest leadership capability is built in the field, not in theory. Napoleon Bonaparte built an empire on these 7 ideas. And what is remarkable, what makes him worth studying this deeply, is that none of these principles belong to the 19th century. Every single one of them is operating somewhere right now, in the best companies, in the best teams, in the best leaders of this generation. Because great leadership has never changed. Only the battlefield has